overseas in Europe, they're going Tropo at the moment about all the tourists who are coming over. Of course, it's summer in Europe now and tourists are flocking there to soak up some of the warm weather. A mate of mine's just done 2 weeks in Morocco and then arrived in Spain the other day, and he's thoroughly enjoying that. I spoke to him I think it was last night at about 10 a.m. local time. It was already over 30 degrees. He was about to jump in the pool, which sounded quite pleasant as I was driving into work here in chilly Sydney, but they're angry. Would you believe it? You can see it on the screen here with all these tourists. They've been protesting in Spain, in Barcelona. They've been protesting over in Milan, in Venice, Lisbon, Naples, on and on it goes, because there are too many tourists, the locals say. They say they've been overrun by tourists and everything is now far too expensive. They can't afford coffee, apparently. They can't afford to go out to eat. They can't afford to buy an alcoholic drink because, of course, they're jacking up all the prices in the restaurants and the cafes to cater to the cashed-up tourists who've come in with all their money from the UK and Australia, etc. And I can kind of understand. By the way, they were shooting tourists with water pistols, which is actually quite funny. I can kind of understand where they're coming from, because I get it if you're a local and all of a sudden you're essentially priced out of your own city because the city is now overrun with tourists who are awash with money. You would go, well, what the hell? This is my town. I've lived here my whole life. I should be able to afford to live here. And Barcelona had 26 million tourists last year. It's a city of 1.6 million people. So these are sizable numbers of people. But are they not biting the hand that feeds them to some degree? Because tourism is huge business for Europe. So you can say, look, it's become too expensive to live here and I don't like that. But if you took the tourists away, what underpins the economy, particularly at this time of year for these countries? They'd find themselves in recession, would they not?
Exactly. And in those Mediterranean states where they were protesting, Spain, Portugal, Italy, tourism makes up to 20% of their GDP. 20%, millions and millions of jobs. If tourism was taken away, if those cashed up Aussies and Brits didn't get to go to Spain, then they would also suffer. So yes, things are more expensive, but you're also making more money. And tourism is also critical for Europe because they have barely any innovation. Their productivity is lagging. They're extremely overregulated. It's hard to do business in any other sector other than tourism and agriculture in a lot of these Mediterranean countries. So if they don't have that, what else do they have? Do these protesters want to get out onto the farm? I doubt it.
I've got a lot of sympathy for these guys. You mentioned the stats, right? So Barcelona, 1.6 million people living there. 26 million tourists a year. Santorini, 15,000 people living there, 3.4 million tourists a year. Lisbon, 500,000 people living there, 6 million tourists a year. Compared to Sydney, 5.5 million people living here, 3.5 million tourists a year. So I can understand why they'd be upset. So they're trying to take some measures to counter this, right? So they're not anti-tourists. They're just anti-mass tourism that is unregulated and unchecked. In Venice, they've introduced a tourism tax to try and, mitigate some of the lifestyle factors that are impacted by huge numbers of people. In Barcelona, they've put regulations on Airbnbs to try and mitigate the housing crisis caused by mass tourism. I like in Santorini, they've actually regulated who can and can't ride on donkeys because they had so many people arriving and needing to go up the hill on donkeys. There were complaints from locals that donkeys' spinal injuries were through the roof. Oh, no. And so now it's actually a regulation. Tourists who weigh 100 kilograms or more are not allowed to ride on donkeys.
No Yanks allowed.
Yeah, so they've put in some mitigating strategy. But I understand, and the villain here is not the tourists. The villain is the socialist governments who have stripped manufacturing, gotten rid of all the jobs. They've created a massive welfare state, and the only way to pay for it now is to show off the ruins of their culture. What about modern day now? What's happening now? The villain is the socialist governments who've left these people with not much option now to make a buck than to wait tables.
Yeah, exactly right. And in that respect, I do feel bad for them. Their city has basically become a theme park rather than their own home.
I get why they're mad.
It is, yeah.